DOMA is DOA. This is Next Generation Beat, and I'm John Phillips. In a 5-4 decision, the Supreme Court ruled that the Defense of Marriage Act is unconstitutional, with Reagan appointee Anthony Kennedy providing the swing vote. For social conservatives, Anthony Kennedy is about as reliable as birth control. 1 out of 3 times, surprise! Supporters of gay marriage are jubilant. Opponents are upset. But the country as a whole has a very different attitude about gay marriage than they did back in 2004 when President Bush proposed a constitutional amendment defining marriages between a man and a woman. According to a recent Washington Post ABC News poll, 58% of Americans now support gay marriage, with 36% opposed. When you look at the next generation, the numbers are even more striking. 73% of Democrats between the ages of 18 to 49 support same-sex marriage, as do 52% of Republicans. Let me repeat that one more time. 52% of Republicans under the age of 50 support gay marriage. On gay marriage, the train has left the station. Given these numbers, it's clear that if California voters had to take a revote on Proposition 8, which outlawed gay marriage, it would be put out, which, by the way, was also put out to pasture by the Supreme Court. There's no question what the outcome would be. It would be defeated. The country has moved dramatically on this issue, and the next generation is leading the way. Here to discuss this and much, much more is our Next Generation Beat panel. She's the host of the Tammy Bruce radio show, available online at tammybruce.com. Tammy Bruce. He's the fair-minded civil rights defense attorney and talk show host at Talk Radio 790 KABC in Los Angeles, Leo Terrell, and from his home studio in the Keystone State, PJTV contributor Scott Ott. So, Leo, let's start with you.
Sure.
You're a civil rights attorney.
Yes.
Civil rights movement, civil rights cases before the Supreme Court happened in kind of the inverse way of what we're seeing with gay marriage. The court moved before the country was there. And because of that, we had a lot of problems for a long time.
Sure.
The country, in terms of gay marriage, is ahead of the court.
Yes.
You look at these poll numbers, this isn't close. This is a blowout.
I agree with you 100%. Look, this is going to happen. It's just a matter of when. Eventually, it would be against the law to deny any same-sex couple the right to marry. The Supreme Court ruling today in Prop 8 basically legalized gay marriages in California. And the decision in DOMA was very clear. You can't not deny federal benefits to individuals who are legally married in states that recognize gay marriage. This is something that has to happen sooner than later. And as you correctly stated, 30 or 40 years ago, the courts were ahead of ending segregation, like Virginia versus Loving, where it was against the law for interracial couples to marry. The people were against it, but the courts were ahead of the game. You're right, the courts are now behind, but they will eventually catch up.
Tammy, your thoughts?
Well, you know, I find it interesting, and of course there has been a major shift, and I think part of that is because more and more people are getting to know more gay people. I mean, it's understandable, and there's a difference between the next generation, which has a completely different point of view on this, but they need to know as well that America wasn't always feeling this way. So the divide that we have with older Americans is somewhat understandable considering the world that they grew up in. Now, for everyone who also might be worrying about this is going to be like sequester, right? Everybody thinks the sky's going to fall, and it won't. The truth of the matter is George W. Bush, as you mentioned, wanted to do a constitutional amendment because it is unconstitutional to deny gay people the right to marry because of equal protection, right? The moment, here's the other issue for conservatives to consider as well. The moment the federal government decided to issue licenses to engage in a religious ceremony is when the problem began. So if the government had recognized its limited role from the beginning and never got involved in marriage, this wouldn't be an issue. Right now, there's over 1,000 federal rights that you get when you're married. And I think the American people have realized, look, we can't continue to put people out simply because they fall in love with somebody of the same sex, that this is America, and we're going to adapt to that.
Scott Ott, what do you make of the difference between the support among younger conservatives, younger Republicans, and older Republicans? Because we're seeing a lot of movement in favor of same-sex marriage from younger conservatives and Republicans.
Well, what I make of it is exactly nothing. The popularity opinion polls that are being conducted right now should feed into a democratic process. But what the Supreme Court has done with this DOMA ruling specifically has short-circuited the democratic process. First of all, the court inserted itself into an argument where there was no dispute. As our viewers probably know, this case was actually resolved at a lower court level, and the federal government no longer had a beef. The defendant was awarded a judgment by the lower court. And yet, the case kept going up to the Supreme Court. If you read Justice Scalia's dissent in this case, in addition to the majority opinion, you'll see that, first of all, he says the court had no business taking this case at all. And secondly, why not let the democratic process carry itself out? The precedent that's worrisome here is not the one having to do with whom you sleep. It's having to do with how powerful your federal government has become, and specifically the judicial branch.
Well, I like Scott, but I disagree with him. Sometimes the people get it wrong. The whole purpose of the Supreme Court is to be this impartial, nonpartisan bystander. And again, going back to what you said about racial discrimination in the past, if we allow the democratic process to take place, we might still have segregation. Yeah. 30 or 40 years ago, it was bad to be gay.
Here's the issue.
And let me just finish this one point.
That's not true in this case.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're challenging the Supreme Court because they got involved in basically trumping a democratic election or a political process. I'm saying to you that that's the job of the Supreme Court. That's the job of the court system, to get involved when the majority gets it wrong.
The states have now decided in many cases that homosexual marriage is okay.
I think it's something let me say this.
We've got like 12 states so far that have permitted that.
But
the
here's
states
the issue.
are the ones that decide marriage relationships, not the federal government.
Scott, you're right. Here's the issue. As the states were going along dealing with this issue, there was the Defense of Marriage Act. So this should be a really great piece of news for conservatives. The Supreme Court chopped down a federal law that was interfering with what states were doing on their own. Conservatives should want this in the state realm, and if the state realms are going to prevail, the Defense of Marriage Act needed to go. This is a conservative victory when you talk about federalism.
And let's just be honest about this, too.
It would be.
Given these poll numbers, if Californians were to vote on Proposition 8 today, in 2013, or next time on the ballot in 2014, there is no way Proposition 8 would pass. The country is just, they've changed their mind between 2008 and now.
Proposition 8, when that was being promoted, it was being promoted when Obama was of course, running for president the first time. It was being promoted as a religious issue, and it was one of those things that drew people into the voting dynamic. And many supporters of Barack Obama, African American Christians, who then voted that way. Look, you can narrowcast any message to any voting bloc, and you can get the answer you want, I think, at any time.
But here's the problem. We're talking about the 14th Amendment, equal protection. The bottom line is, should gays be treated as equal as anyone else, regardless of race and color? And the answer under the Constitution is yes. Yeah. And sometimes the voters get it wrong. I want to say one thing. I have lived next to a gay couple 15 years. They were in love with each other. My arms didn't fall off. My knees didn't knock. My house didn't get infested with rodents. It's okay. And what I find...
But you did have to put out for a salad shooter when they got married. You did have to put out for a salad shooter when they got married.
Maybe so. But my point is simply this. Sometimes the voters get it wrong, and the job of the Supreme Court and the job of the court is to get it right.
One of the last images, though, and this is the thing that certainly the next generation of gay people or straight conservatives in general need to consider. Americans, for the longest time, only saw the gay point of view through gay pride parades, and saw gay men yelling for respect, and every now and then, once a year, they'd see gay men running around on the street either dressed as cheerleaders or dressed in Speedos. That is not a very good image. Now that more gays are seen within the framework, that's good. But the reality is that in order to get respect, in order to get this kind of attitude of embracement by the American people, and as conservatives, it's about personal responsibility and behavior that adds an element of goodness to your community. The gay community, gay and straight, needs to recognize that a bit more, and I think we'd have fewer of these conversations.
Scott, what are your thoughts on Anthony Kennedy being the swing vote that gave the majority the 5th vote that they needed to toss out DOMA?
Well, he's been a swinger from way back. I mean, there's no surprise there, really.
Oopsie doopsie.
And hey, you know, not that there's anything wrong with that. So, I think that, frankly, unfortunately, once again, conservatives are going to get drawn into a debate about whether homosexuality is right or wrong, whether gay marriage is right or wrong. And while we fiddle around, Rome will burn, in the sense that the Supreme Court will be making decisions. In this case, they actually made a decision where they said, this in a sense is bigger than Marbury versus Madison. They said, we're the ones who say what the law is, even when there is no case being contested before the court.
Let me just say this. We know before the decisions come out which Supreme Court justices are the Republicans or who's the Democrats, who's the liberal and the conservatives. We didn't have that 20 or 30 years ago. I remember, notwithstanding his politics, Earl Warren, appointed by a Republican, when there was a major social issues like this, there was an agreement among all the parties that we need to send a message. And what we have is a split up Supreme Court that you can draw your opinions based on who's the Republican, who's appointed by the Republican, who's appointed by the Democrats. 20, 30 years ago, it wasn't that case.
Tammy, talk to me about the movement on the right. You speak to a Tea Party audience, or a largely Tea Party audience, on your radio show. And when you were on terrestrial radio on KFI and KABC in Los Angeles, you talked to some of the country club Republicans and people in the movement who would probably not consider themselves as Tea Partiers. Do you think that this support of gay marriage within the Republican movement is because of the libertarian leanings that the Tea Party has and those sympathetic to the Tea Party have? Or do you think this is the country club Republicans that are
I think it's both, and I also think that it's that next generation that is now influencing their parents. That as they're getting older and there's more of a realization about who gay people are, but even if you've got a straight kid and they're having a different experience socially, that I think the conversation is broadened amongst everyone here in America. And look, I think there's a difference between religious conservatives and conservatives. For a very long time, religious conservatives controlled the dialogue. That has also changed because of Tea Party. Tea Party is the ultimate real big tent, but it's on the fiscal issues. But I think really it is about young people having conversations with their own family, and I think that's what changes things, the conversations at the dinner table.
When you saw the celebrations today, there were young people celebrating. A lot of young people who relate to that. Very young crowd. Look at that. People who are young, teenage, college people who can now come out and feel good about themselves.
How about it, Scott? Is the Tea Party pushing the Republicans to support gay marriage?
I don't think so. I think we need to have a drum circle here. I can't believe I'm sitting in a studio setting here with a couple of people who are conservatives, and we're all, all squishy-feely about how the younger generation feels. Where are the issues of law? Come on, Leo, you're an attorney. Can't you look at this objectively as an attorney?
As the fair-minded civil rights attorney, I'm looking at it very objectively, and I think it's fair.
And as the unfair, not an attorney, I'm looking at it fairly too.
Scott? Scott?
I guess he's done.
Scott, he's done.
Yeah, he's done.
All right. So now when you look at these numbers and you look at what's happened, if Republican candidates running for president continue to stress social issues or take positions against the public, it's 58 to 36, that's a big spread. Is that going to be a liability for Republican candidates running for president in the future?
Yes. There's nothing else I can say. Yes. If they are against gay marriage or equal rights for gays, yes.
Not necessarily, in that my point to many people who are against gay marriage is you can be against gay marriage and not be a homophobe, right? It depends on if you're a person of faith, and you can have that position and know the difference between what your own position is, and we can respect that, and if you're a good legislator, then fine. But I think that's the argument that has to be made, and if the Republicans are going to maintain their own narrative and not let the Democrats and the liberals control the narrative, we will be the actual ultimate big tent, just like this program here today.
Well, I think that is an important point, and that's something that those of us who support same-sex marriage should stress.
Yeah.
And not all of the people in the movement stress that. You can be against gay marriage and not be a bigot, and not be anti-gay or anti-lesbian.
It's about your faith. That has nothing to do with the gays or anybody else.
And look, I mean, this is an institution that has been one way since the beginning of time, and change is something that happens. It's happening very fast. It's happening as I think it was Scalia said, gay marriage is newer than cell phones. So, not everyone is going to evolve.
And even everyone watching this program, but everyone watching this program too, they are going to, just like with Scott, we're going to have disagreements on this. The difference is, are we going to allow the left to control this narrative as being that if you're a conservative against gay marriage, you're somehow a bigot. We got to shoot that down right away.
But just 40 years ago in the state of Virginia, it was prohibited for a black and white to marry. Who would take that position now? And I'm simply saying to you right now, as I said before, it takes, sometimes the court is ahead of the public, and sometimes the public is ahead of the court. Right now, the public's ahead of the court. And that was taboo just 40 years ago, and I see this now. It's a trend that, as you correctly stated, had already left the station.
And for any conservative who's concerned now, for the 4 million Republicans who stayed home in 2012 and did not vote for Romney, and if Obama gets another chance with the Supreme Court, this is why the Supreme Court's very important, and why 2014 is important, and why 16 is important. So this is, and you know, if you're concerned about any of these positions, what happened yesterday with civil rights, what happened today, the Supreme Court and the presidency, and now the Senate, of course, matters.
Scott, we'll give you the last word.
And this is just why this is just why younger people should be especially concerned about a ruling like this one. Because let's say that Tammy, that right-wing wacko, gets her way, and we wind up getting a Republican president who appoints conservative justices, and they make a decision that they shouldn't have even intervened in a case where they shouldn't have even been involved, that usurps state rights in a way that you don't like. Things are going to be a lot different.
It's sending it back to the states, Scott. I don't know. This eliminates federal encroachment on states being able to take action. I'm very confused about why you're upset about this.
And my law student right here is absolutely correct. As far as Prop 8, they kicked it back to the state, and they basically, and DOMA, they simply said, hey, this is an issue where federal benefits, as Tammy was talking about, hey, it's none of our business.
This did not tell the states to do anything. It leaves the states now open to do whatever they want.
The Supreme Court didn't legalize gay marriage.
It overruled the will of Congress. It overruled the will of Congress.
Well, that's not has nothing to do with the states then. Oh, now.
Get them out of here.
All right. We're going to have to leave it at that.
It ruled on something that was already decided at a lower court level.
Lucy?
Lucy?
We're going to have to leave it at that. For Tammy Bruce, Leo Terrell, and Scott Ott in the state of Pennsylvania, I'm John Phillips. If you'd like to comment on today's show, I have a feeling some of you might have comments. You can do it below me or on Facebook at facebook.com/NextGenTV. For Next Generation Beat, I'm John Phillips. Thanks for watching.